6 NBDF series of webinar. The topic of today's webinar is about water and food, and the specific theme. Today's topic will be water for food and nutrition security. Your host will be Dr. Amara Haile-Selassie. Now I think time to start the webinar. Without further ado, I'll invite Dr. Amara to host the webinar. Thank you very much. Dr. Amara, please.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Johannes. This is Amara Haile-Selassie. I'm from International Water Management Institute. International Water Management Institute is co-hosting this webinar, as Johannes illustrated, explained. This is the 6th Nile Basin Development Forum with a theme of thinking regional investment in Nile Basin, water, energy, food, and environment, climate change. So this webinar is titled Tools, Approach, and the Technology to Understand and Enhance the State of Water Productivity to Gain in Food and the Nutritional Security. We have another 2 more webinars which will be held on 12th and the 15th of April. I will kindly invite you also to that one. So briefly to highlight, I think, on how we go forward for every speaker, please mention your name, affiliation, country of residence, and presentation title before you start. And we will have 3 keynote speakers on different key areas of, focus, and we'll have 4 presentations, and then we'll have a panel discussion. So while waiting for Dr. Adana Chiared from the Basin Development Authority of Ethiopia, I can briefly tell who the keynote speakers are. First, we will have Dr. Bart Hillard on the state of food security and the need for productive use of water in Nile Basin. Then we'll have Dr. Tlaun Amade from AGRA on producing more for less agricultural water technology options for Nile Basin. And thirdly, we'll have Dr. Dawit Mokonnen from IFPRI on improving irrigation performance for better nutritional gain and security. So the presenters are Dr. Iltigani from Sudan on options to enhance efficient agricultural water use in basin to achieve food security. Dr. Emmanuel Ararsa from Ethiopia, Gondar University, Associate Professor on blue water saving, potential through deficit irrigation and the mulching in Nile Basin. And Dr. Khalid from Sudan on estimation of water consumption and the productivity for wheat using remote sensing and the Sebal model under modern irrigation systems in Sudan. And Mr. Laban, the extent of cage aquaculture, adherence to best practice and the reflection of sustainable aquaculture on Nile Basin water bodies. All the keynote speakers have 15 minutes allotted. We very kindly request you to adhere to this time. All the presenters have 10 minutes. So with this, I'm not sure if Dr. Adanek is already there.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great. I can see my flag. Welcome, Dr. Adanek. This is your time to give us an opening remark. You have about 10 minutes. Dr. Adanek Yared is Director General of Basin Development Authority of Ethiopia. She is a hydrologist by profession, was Associate Professor at Addis Ababa University. Dr. Adanech, welcome. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Amara. Dear distinguished organizers and co-conveners, keynote speakers, paper presenters, facilitators, moderators, webinar participants, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure and honors to welcome you all to this webinar session under the stream Water for Food and Nutrition Security for 6 Nile Basin Development Forum. Distinguished participants, there is a high need in the Nile Basin for information about current status of understanding and knowledge related to productive use of irrigation, water, and to explore technologies, scenarios, and policy direction enabling gains in food security and nutrition in the Nile Basin. A look into the tools, approach, and technologies to understand and enhance a state of water productivity over the Nile Basin is crucial to produce more for less agriculture, water, and ensure food and nutrition security. Options for better utilization rain-fed agriculture in the Nile Basin also need to be widely explored if we are to tap into its full potential and use it to respond to current challenges such as climate change. In addition, aspects of irrigation agriculture like the trend of expansion, water saving measures, and its economic value need to be investigated and adopted for managing irrigated agriculture in the Nile Basin. Water, energy, food nexus information like the ones to be shared in this webinar also provide information for stakeholders, discussion, and development of options critical for sustainable river basin planning in the Nile Basin. It is thus with great pleasure that I welcome you all to this important webinar that will help us all take a step forward towards food security in the Nile Basin. Let's have fruitful presentation and discussion, and let's work together to incorporate and finding of the session in our discussion making. Thank you so much. I wish a fruitful discussion and presentation time. Thank you, Dr. Amare and colleagues. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for a very concise, informative opening speech. Next, we'll go to the first keynote speaker, Dr. Bart Hillard, who is a private consultant and have been in Africa, in Nile Basin for several years. Now, Bart is with us, but we prefer to, with interest of time, we prefer to screen his video. Please, Patrick, can you start screening his video? We can't hear. We can't hear.
It's the volume level in the recording. This is the maximum.
No, there is no sound at all. So I'm with Patrick. Patrick?
Yes, please.
Would
you like us to stop it?
With interest of time, can you adjust this while we are starting the next speaker? Would that be okay?
The sound recording, the recording level, the voice is low, the volume is low. So we cannot adjust it.
So let's take another moment just to think how best we can handle this. I will rather go to the next speaker with interest.
Okay, please.
That okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot. So technology is sometimes very difficult. Colleagues, friends, let's move to the next speaker until our IT people are just problem with the sounds of this film. Dr. Tlaun Amade is our next keynote speaker who is going to highlight on producing more for less, agricultural water, technology options for Nile Basin. Dr. Tlaun is head of resilience, climate, soils at Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa. He has been serving a number of CGR centers here for the last decade. He has been working for SIAT. He has been then working for International Water Management Institute, and he has been, before he moved to AGRA, he has been working also for ECRISAT as a country director for Ethiopia. So with this brief introduction, Dr. Tlaun, you have 15 minutes. The floor is yours. Thanks a lot.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you, Dr. Amara, for the introduction. My talk will be focusing on water productivity, and I prefer to talk about livestock water productivity in a changing climate, because we know a lot about crop water productivity. To start with, my slides are not moving. Yes, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to display, our continent, Africa, and, our water use and productivity is dictated by our farming systems. And in Africa, we have, recently we developed the African Farming System Map together with a group from ACIR. And we divided Africa into about 13 major farming systems. And if you could see, in almost all the systems, there's a significant amount of livestock in each system. Also, the intensity will vary probably from the dry pastoral, agro-pastoral systems, the savannas, to the wet systems. In fact, you get even much more livestock concentration in irrigated systems. And the value of water and the productivity of water also is dictated by, these system scenarios. I think almost all of you must have, appreciated the role of livestock in African. They produce food security, enhance crop production because we use them as a draft power. They generate income for farmers. They also, add goods and services to our livelihoods, and additional benefits are like, converters of residue to quality manure and money. So all the, almost African farming systems, livestock is dependent hugely on crop residue, and that is converted into milk, meat, and money. But also livestock distribute nutrients across farms and landscapes. So very important contributors of nutrient recycling. So all sorts of benefits we get from livestock. And as you know, there is an increasing demand for livestock and livestock products, particularly strongly linked to urbanization, almost at a growing rate between 2.5 to 4% a year, particularly in developing countries. And the estimation that livestock may produce as much value to global agricultural output like that of crops, and it can be even more in the coming centuries. So if you see the Nile Basin, in fact, you could see that most of the water in the basin is probably used by livestock and crop. So all these yellow parts are grasslands where really livestock systems are dependent, starting from the lake region to Egypt, particularly in this eastern Nile part, where there's a lot of livestock concentration. And this, of course, has a significant effect on the water use and water productivity. This is a very old slide from IMI, which I really like to display that with, current consumption of water, unless we do savings, improve productivity, the water consumption in the coming century will be much higher. So the system may not be in a position even to support it. So that is where really we need the saving, which is a concept of water productivity. And, livestock is in the West alleged to use more water than other commodities. You could see here crop commodities produce, a kg of produce. See more demand from the livestock side. Also, we know that, in Africa, we don't feed grain to livestock. So these numbers are probably much lower for us, and yet probably higher than what we have for crops. So that is where we thought, this concept of water productivity is important, and we have developed it together with, our colleague Amara was part of us. Dom Peden was, spearheading earlier, 15 years ago, this concept whereby livestock water productivity, we're trying to quantify it based on, the net additions of beneficial outputs divided by depleted water. So when we talk about benefits, about, not only milk and meat, which is for us much beyond, probably in countries like India, the milk could be a major contributor. But for us, the manure, the draft power, the hides, all those roles of livestock should be considered in the net benefit analysis. Then from the water side, about evaporation, transpiration, and discharge related to livestock systems. And when you see, the livestock systems, for example, in Ethiopia, it's a very extractive system, whereby, the livestock system is not supported well in terms of feeds, so a huge feed balance. These are different districts in the country. In the north, in Amhara region, almost in every district there is, a feed deficit. So the livestock productivity was hampered by feed shortage. And you see here a system, we analyzed it again probably 10, 12 years ago, whereby when we analyze it, the whole energy requirement versus the number of livestock, the deficit of about 47% of feed. So this land, this productivity could have required another 250 hectares of land for that specific watershed. So to analyze it, really the flows of water because of livestock on water, and crop. These are areas around in the well watered regions in Gojam. This is in dry regions in eastern part of Amhara. You see that most of the water in the well water regions is lost through evaporation, but also lost through runoff and deep percolation. Also, of course, livestock in every sector, it was a major contributor for water depletion, followed by livestock, followed by crop. But the drier regions were much more economical. So there's limited runoff, there's limited loss through percolation, but more water was lost through livestock, and then more through evaporation than to transpiration. So when we talk about water productivity, the issue is how do we convert this evaporation, this runoff, and this percolation into transpiration, which is producing more feed per unit of water. The same is true here. So this is really where challenge we have. So how do we do that? Is one, we're trying to develop some of strategies. One is really improving rainwater management. So capturing the water from extreme events, like for example, floods. You could see here in Afar in eastern Ethiopia, whereby we used physical structures, weirs, together with GIZ when I was in ICRSAT, capture the water here in this form and rehabilitate the whole rangeland, in a very short period of time, in 3-4 years' time, you could see this type of regreening, which is really improving livestock water productivity. And used, for example, map the whole landscape and see where water is accumulating, where nutrients are accumulating, and advise extension agents what to grow where and where the livestock system should go. And you see this type of huge biomass production in a very short period of time. It's like in a season, almost 3 meters of napier, which really can improve water productivity hugely. But also mapping the whole region using satellite imagery, identify where the floods are accumulated, and then provide the extension, what to do where and which districts are getting how much land to be converted to proactive use. So these are ways to again convert lost water almost, which is a very fast going flood to produce livestock and crop. The second one, of course, related to this is feed sourcing. Crop residue management, as I said, is a very important contributor for livestock feed. So the amount of feed produced here in this system is accounted for crop. So livestock is really an added value, which is improving productivity. So we have to really focus on water, and people think, when talk about livestock water, people think it's about the water livestock is drinking. It's about the feed the livestock is eating, which is really consume most of the water. So crop residue management, pasture management, also improving, and converting some of the degraded landscapes, gullies, to produce, biomass, which could be used as livestock feed. Is a very important strategy to enhance livestock water productivity, in general landscape water productivity in our region, but also using really fertilizers. You could see
2 minutes.
More biomass when you apply fertilizer per unit of water. And that, of course, will vary from system to system. In general, if you analyze the water productivity of households, you'll see that more money will come from livestock water productivity than crop water productivity, and more, for example, in the extensive high rainfall valley-based systems than water-consuming rice-based systems. So these are like strategies to maximize water productivity. So considering both crop and livestock to improve income per unit of water for households. I talked about fertilizers, but also improving the livestock itself and the livestock system across the value chain, be it the nutrition, the veterinary care, the genetic resources, but also linking livestock producers with market. All that brings more money per unit of water. And of course, considering livestock in developing irrigation schemes, having turfs for livestock, and in drier areas bringing more watering points. So the landscape will improve water productivity because livestock will spend less energy to walk in search for water. So the energy can be converted into meat and milk. That can be then that can produce more value to livestock systems. So my last slide. We have then tried to develop, this model framework where we have the technologies related to the livestock, related to water and the feed, but also the institutions related to really the political environment, institutional change, leadership, all that supported by local and regional policies can bring, the Nile, for example, can bring more grain and more livestock per unit of investment of labor, and that all will lead to enhanced livestock productivity, which will contribute to impacts in terms of poverty alleviation, environment, and resilience. The impact cannot happen unless you take it to scale, unless you target your interventions, but also unless you work with communities at local level. So bringing in context-specific interventions. Thank you very, very much. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Tlahun. Maybe you can, unshare your screen. Then I invite Bart while I try to summarize Dr. Tlahun's speech. Bart, can you share your slide? Thanks a lot. Bart? Bart?
Amara, what would you like me to do? Shall I try one more time if the video works on when I run it through my computer? And if it doesn't work, then I'll give the live presentation.
Yeah, that would be okay also, as convenient for you. While I try to summarize Dr. Tlahun's presentation, you can try the system just to be on board. Thanks a lot. Once again, Dr. Tlahun, this is an interesting thematic area when we talk about producing more for less. Well, the heading of the title of your presentation is about livestock water, but in some of the slide, I clearly saw that there are significant proportion of crop residue that goes into the animal feed system, meaning your presentation also addresses that one has to look at things system perspectives, particularly in enhancing crop water productivity so that you got better water productive crop residue that goes to your animal compartment. This is one thing, and probably also when you go in a complete dry areas where, for example, there is no link between highland, high rainfall areas in the dry area where you can, as you showed us, you can capture runoff to produce feed. I think the scenario could be completely different, and where the water has no opportunity cost, like we have seen for the highland area, mid-highland area, a bit dry, or where highland and the lowland are interconnected. Thanks for that insight. I think you brought an interesting idea into picture, an entry point where we can save water, we produce more for less. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bart?
let's give it a try.
Great.
Can you hear it?
Yeah, we can hear you, but not the video.
Is there any sound?
No.
So there's no sound at all.
No sound at all, Bart.
Okay, then I'll just I'll make the presentation.
Share your slide. Just give us highlight.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, really.
Oh, no problem. No problem. So let me get this. Then I go to the other one.
Yeah.
Do you see this at the moment?
No, we don't see your slide.
From beginning.
Good morning, everybody.
Oh, that's coming.
Let's hope.
When you look at food security nowadays, it's usually a mixed picture, but also the serving picture. When we look at, for instance, the prevalence of malnourishment, which is presented in this figure here, we see that things are more or less okay in Egypt. Things are improving in Ethiopia. Things are pretty much stable in Sudan.
So what do you see, guys?
But the situation is slowly getting worse.
But we are not seeing your screen, Bart, and your volume is low. But previously you were speaking at a high volume.
1 second, Nicholas.
The increase.
Okay, so this is very. So now you should see this one.
Yes.
So now I start from the beginning.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Bart Hillard. I've been working in analysis for many, many years. I've been involved in the production of the announced database in 2012 and also in the newest version, 2020 version. And I think I must have met many, many of you. Today, we're going to talk about the state of food security and the need for improving agricultural water quality.
It is very slow, Bart. Very low, very low.
Okay, guys, I don't know what I'm doing right now. So 1 second, please. Wait a minute, 1 second, please. Cancel. So this one doesn't work.
Dr. Mare, maybe let's move to the next meeting.
Yeah, let's move to the next
presentation.
speaker. Thanks. Then we move to Dr. Dawit Mokonnen from International Food Policy Research Institute. Dawit Mokonnen is a research fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute in the Environment and the Production Technology Division. He is trained in applied economics, and his research interests include productivity and efficiency analysis, water economics, agricultural input system, impact evaluation of development projects. Dawit's current research in Sub-Saharan Africa focuses on understanding the impact of irrigation on agricultural water productivity, nutrition, health, women empowerment. He will give us a presentation on improving irrigation performance for better nutritional gain and security. With this brief introduction, I will call Dr. Dawit. The floor is yours, Dawit.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you can. We can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Dr. Amar. I was on mute. Hello, everyone. As Dr. Amar said, I'm a research fellow at IFPRI, based in Addis currently. So my presentation today lies under the third lead question of this webinar, which focuses on how and to what extent irrigation influences dietary diversity and nutrition security in the Nile Basin. And this presentation, as well as most of the work that I rely on, have been implemented under the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Small-Scale Irrigation, which is supported by USAID. So the hypothesis of both the presentation as well as the works I will mention in these slides is that the way irrigation is implemented in Africa and developing countries, and particularly the Nile Basin, depending on in terms of water sources, in terms of technologies, crop choices, is going to influence the nutritional status of households, women, and children. And particularly in the two countries that I have data on, Ethiopia and Tanzania from the Nile Basin, most of, as you all know, irrigation potential has not yet been tapped fully, according to, for instance, the 2017 Aquastat dataset. The cubed irrigation in Ethiopia as a share of total potential for irrigation is less than 30%, and or about 32%. In Tanzania, it is about 17% of the potential is currently cubed for irrigation. On the flip side, that means that there is enough potential to design nutrition sensitive and nutrition smart irrigation as we are yet to begin begin the development of irrigation. In most countries, however, both governments have shown repeatedly their strong support for development of both small-scale irrigation as well as large-scale irrigation. And I think this is a very important topic, which is not yet fully exploited, but I think there are recent efforts to see whether or not we can think about irrigation beyond increased yield, but also in terms of nutritional and food security. With that, I will directly go to the pathways through which we think irrigation is related to nutrition. For some reason, my slide is not moving. Let me try. Okay, what do we do here? Looks like if I am on a full screen mode, I can't move the slide. So
we can see. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. So I think for at least there are about 5 pathways. It's not complete, but at least 5 prominent pathways through which irrigation can be linked to nutrition. The first one is, and probably the most obvious one, is the production pathway. What we mean by that is irrigation generally tends to have higher yields, particularly when it is combined with complementary inputs. And it also allows or it provides farmers opportunity to produce in the lean season. It also it is usually used for the production of fruits and vegetables, which have significant nutrition implications. So that production pathway is going to be one linkage between irrigation and nutrition. Something that can be added in this pathway is also the fact that irrigation, given the number of times people produce, it also provides the opportunity to diversify crop production. At the same time, we also have a potential for monocropping, particularly in high value areas. So that is one pathway, but the other pathway is the income pathway. Irrigators tend to get 2 to 3 times higher revenue per hectare compared to rainfed farmers, and that income, particularly when it is accompanied by good access to markets, can lead to improved nutritional and food security. The third pathway I want to mention is the water supply pathway. So by this, what we mean is when you have irrigation in an area, then it's not just used for crop production. There is actually multiple uses that includes household drinking purposes. It can be used for domestic cooking and bathing purposes, as well as livestock watering, irrigated fodder production, and so on. So that water supply pathway has to be studied as well, because it will have significant implication and on nutritional status, as it can improve wash environment if done properly. Another pathway that can link irrigation with nutrition is the health risks pathway. So by that, what we mean is, depending on the water source and how that water is being delivered, then irrigation can have risks from particularly vector-borne diseases such as malaria and dengue. On the other hand, given the higher income that irrigation fetches per hectare, irrigators tend to spend more on health expenditure that improves both the health and nutritional security of the household. The last pathway I want to mention is the women's empowerment pathway. Depending on how irrigation is implemented, it can lead to improved nutrition through improving women's empowerment. For instance, it can having access, say, to irrigation pump is going to increase women's access to productive assets. It also, coupled with other interventions, can allow women to control for most of the income that the higher income that they receive from irrigated agriculture. Women are also expected usually to spend most of the higher income on expenditure that improves household nutritional and food security. They are also more likely to use irrigation on vegetables and fruits that can have direct implications on what is being consumed in the household. For the rest of the presentation, I will focus on what we have been doing in Ethiopia and in Tanzania under the Innovation Lab for Small Scale Irrigation. We have collected data, 2 rounds of data from households in Ethiopia and in Tanzania, in both countries in 2014-15 and in 2017. In addition, we have data from Ethiopia, 3 rounds of surveys within a year under a related sustainably intensified production system project. That one gives us a chance to look at seasonality issues in terms of how irrigation can affect food security and nutrition in different periods across the year. So I might say more on the Ethiopia data, even though I also say a few things that compares Ethiopia and Tanzania from the other data set. So just directly jumping into the results, we see that in both Ethiopia and Tanzania, irrigators have about 3 times higher farm income compared to rain-fed farmers. And in terms of just to provide some descriptive statistics on indicators of food security and diversity. The first one is on household food insecurity access scale. This scale ranges from 0 to 27. It's based on FAO's guideline. There are about 9 questions, and depending on the response to those 9 questions, then it ranges from 0 to 27. And the higher score means that food insecurity is worse. And in this table, the red colored numbers show that the differences between irrigators and non-irrigators are statistically significantly different from 0. And you can see that in both Ethiopia and Tanzania, household food insecurity is insecurity access scale is lower for irrigators compared to non-irrigators. That means in both countries, irrigators are less likely to be food insecure compared to non-irrigators. The other indicator that I saw here is the Women's Dietary Diversity Score. It is based on the number of food categories consumed by the adult women in the household in the last 24 hours. And it is a good proxy for micronutrient adequacy of diets for the women in the house. And at least in Tanzania, we have seen that irrigators, women in irrigating households, have higher women's dietary diversity score. We also looked at household dietary diversity, which is based on 12 food categories consumed in the previous 24 hours. And household dietary diversity is a good proxy for economic access to food by the household, or it can also be considered as a proxy for the level of access of dietary energy by the household, which is a good dimension, one critical dimension of food security. And in both countries, irrigators have higher household dietary diversity score. This slide is from Ethiopia, and based on that consecutive 3 surveys per year data set. And here I just want to show that, at least in Ethiopia, most of the diet for women is dominated by grains, pulses, and to some extent vegetables. The consumption of animal source foods such as egg, meat, fishery and poultry, dairy, as well as dark green leafy vegetables and other vitamin A rich fruits and vegetables is insignificant. The entire diet being highly skewed to grains, pulses, and vegetables. Here, I want to show, again, this is for Ethiopia, the minimum dietary diversity for women. This is just like the women's dietary diversity score. It is based on 10 food groups, and just like WDDS, so Women's Dietary Diversity Score, this is also a good proxy for the probability of the nutrient adequacy of diets for women. And the difference between WDDS for MDW, we have a threshold saying that if a woman eats 5 or more of those 10 food groups, then that woman meets the dietary diversity requirement for the day. And the graph, the figure on the left, shows minimum dietary diversity, or the proportion of women who meet the minimum dietary diversity score in different seasons in Ethiopia by irrigation status. So in February and April 2017, this is, by the way, a fasting season in Ethiopia, where Ethiopian Orthodox followers, which comprise most of our surveyed households, abstain from consumption of animal product foods. At the same time, this is also an irrigation season. So here you see that in February to April, during that period, about 7% of women in non-irrigating households met the minimum dietary diversity required, while for irrigating households, about 13.3% of women have met that requirement. Fast forward to October to November, this is a period where harvest from the previous rainy season it has hit the home. Then rain-fed farmers managed to catch up with with irrigating farmers at around 13% of the women having met that minimum dietary diversity requirement. But in July and August, both for irrigators and non-irrigators, the proportion of women that met the requirement has increased, but more so for irrigators. 29% of women in irrigating households have met the 5+ food categories out of the 10, compared to the 17% for rain-fed farmers. On the right as well, it shows animal source foods. Not surprisingly, for February to April, due to the fasting period, there is no difference there. But in October and November, about 23% of women ate some animal source foods in the previous 24 hours for irrigators, compared to about 15 or 16% for non-irrigators. The same thing for July and August. And we also see a similar trend when we use a different indicator, women's dietary diversity score. This is a similar thing as the previous slide, but here we controlled for a number of observed and unobserved effects using econometric analysis. And we find that in February to April, as well as in July and August, irrigators perform much better compared to non-irrigators, both when we look at the MDDW, the minimum dietary diversity score, as well as the women's dietary diversity score. We also found that compared to non-irrigators, this is also a result from an econometric regression. We found that compared to non-irrigators, women in irrigating households have higher consumption of vitamin C and calcium-rich foods, particularly in the February to April season. We also found that irrigators have higher consumption of iron-rich foods in October and November. We also looked at the impact, the relationship between irrigation and nutrition when we bring drought or exposure to drought as another factor. And we find that in Ethiopia, among households who reported having faced drought, women in irrigating households have higher dietary diversity score compared to those in non-irrigating households. In Tanzania, this result also holds that women in irrigating households have higher WDDS compared to non-irrigators, and the difference more than doubles among households facing drought. So it is a good resilience story there in the linkage between irrigation and nutrition. We also looked at irrigation and children's diet. And in Ethiopia, we found that children under 5 years of age in irrigating households have a weight for height Z-score, which is an indicator for wasting. That are, children have like 0.87 standard deviation higher weight for height Z-scores than children in non-irrigating households. In Tanzania, irrigation leads to higher weight for height Z-scores among households who reported having experienced the drought in the previous 5 years. In conclusion, the key takeaway message I think from here is that even though the literature is still very at its infancy, and we still have to do a lot and to understand the irrigation nutrition linkages from different angles by different water technologies, water sources, and so on. The recent literature is showing that irrigation can have strong effects on households' economic access to food and on nutritional outcomes of women and children. And as such, it needs to be promoted on its merits to improve nutrition, in addition to higher income and yield. And based on the work that we have been doing, our colleague Elizabeth Bryan with colleagues from the World Bank have come up with a guideline on what can be done in terms of improving improving nutrition sensitive irrigation. I think the first thing, probably the one that should have been included here, is to accept the multidisciplinary nature of irrigation development. So now water managers okay, and this is my last slide, and engineers, social scientists, and so on, needs to work together to make improvements to make irrigation nutrition sensitive or nutrition smart. Then the other entry point could be incorporating nutritional considerations at the concept stage of the irrigation development. Equipping cooperatives, extensions, and water user associations with nutrition and dietary considerations, leveraging community platforms to deliver nutrition messaging, engaging women in irrigation interventions, promoting nutrient-dense foods through the irrigation are going to be some of the entry pointers to make irrigation nutrition sensitive. That's all I have. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dr. David. We appreciate it's very interesting insights. Just not only irrigation, nutrition relation, rather you brought in the issue between, gender, food security, irrigation, health issues, and so on and so forth. I think you brought in an interesting perspective. So thanks for that. Now let's try with Dr. Bart, if that worked out.
Bart is not with us. Let's go to the next presenter.
I am Nicholas. I'm there. Nicholas, I'm there.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, I don't think we have the screen anymore. 1 second, please. Okay, I had pre-recorded my presentation in order to save some time, but unfortunately I've been wasting everybody's time. So without much further ado, let me start. The presentation is about food security in the Nile Basin and the need to improve agricultural water productivity. And when we look at food security, I think what we see is a very mixed picture, but also a very disturbing picture. For instance, we see that in Egypt, things are pretty okay, and we see that in a number of countries, such as Ethiopia, things are improving. In other countries, such as Sudan and Tanzania, things are quite stable. But in other countries, such as Uganda and Kenya and Rwanda, we see that the prevalence of undernourishment is actually gradually going up. And what this means is that population growth is faster than the capacity to improve agricultural production together with imports. Now, this finding is supported by another one, and that is the average daily calorie intake per capita. And I think we all know that we need about 3,000 kilocalories per capita per day. If a country has that on average, then there are no incidences of famine. And when we look at the Nile countries, we can see that everybody has less than these 3,000 kilocalories per capita per day, apart from Egypt. So currently the situation is not too good, and we do expect a large increase in food demand because of population growth and also because of socioeconomic development. So what it means is that food security remains a critical concern to governments. Is intra-basin trade, is that a solution? You know, people often talk about this. They say we have to go for intra-basin trade, and in principle that's of course a very good thing. But currently, all now countries are net foods importers. None of the now countries is a consistent surplus producer, and also none of them is actually on track to become a consistent surplus producer in the short-term future. I think the country that is closest to it, that is the Sudan. Sudan has all this agricultural potential, and it's very well possible that in, say, the midterm future, it will be able to have a consistent surplus. But then it will be quite difficult to transport this food produce to the countries in, for instance, the equatorial zone, because of the absence of infrastructure for bulk transport. Another thing is that, that we still have very large rural populations. In many of the now countries, this will persist. This will remain so even in 2040, 2050, still large, even dominant rural populations. And many of these people, they simply cannot afford food imports. They'll have to, food security for these people will be based on the food they grow in close vicinity to where they live. Food imports can be useful for the urban population. So what it means is that food security in the Upper Nile region, now let me remove this a little bit, yeah, will be largely based on domestic production and combination with some sub-regional production, trade, I'm sorry. Then would developing large-scale irrigation be a solution? And the answer is also there. Large-scale irrigation alone is not a viable solution because we simply do not have the water. The NBI analyzed a large set of potential irrigation development scenarios with parameters such as future climate, irrigation efficiencies, the level of area expansion. And actually all of these scenarios showed a water deficit. So expansion of large-scale irrigation alone will also not be a viable solution to achieve food security in the Nile Basin. So if we want to achieve food security, we need to have improvements across all farming systems and in combination with some food imports. Let's look at livestock. And here I actually mean the pastoralist farming system. So not so much the more industrial livestock production, but the pastoralist system. The pastoralist system has low productivity, but actually makes very effective use of this arid and semi-arid zone. So the zone between, say, 100 and 400 millimeters of rainfall per year. The pastoralist system is actually the most prevailing farming system in the Nile Basin. It covers the largest area. And it makes actually very productive use of this low value water in this arid and semi-arid zone that actually cannot be used for other agricultural activities because it's too unreliable or not enough. Livestock productivity is low right now, but also implies that there is actually a high potential for improvement. So this can be promising. And I think what is important is that if you look into it, that the low productivity is primarily related to animal management strategies. So yes, better land management and better water management and better fodder management are important, but the increase in productivity will mostly be related to better animal management strategies. And this is important, so it doesn't require much extra water. What I want to say here is that we should not ignore the livestock sector, which is often the case. It's important for food security. It still has a lot of potential. And I think that improvements can be realized without claiming too much extra water. So then we move to the next one, rain-fed farming. In rain-fed farming, there are effectively two variables, and one is land, and the other one is yield. Now, rain-fed farming is important in the Nile Basin because it comprises 87% of arable land, so that is very significant. But what we see is that most prime agricultural land is already in use. So if you want to increase the area, you'll have to go to marginal lands, or you have to encroach wetlands. And even we see that quite some good agricultural land for cultivation is being taken away by urbanization. So the potential for increasing the area is limited. And there are exceptions, of course. There is still good land available in South Sudan and Ethiopia and possibly Sudan. However, area expansion by itself is not an appropriate strategy to achieve food security. And I think that brings us to the next variable in this, in this equation, that is yield. Now, what we see in rain-fed farming is maybe the most striking feature of agriculture in the Nile Basin is this very large yield gap in rain-fed farming. When we look, for instance, at maize, we see 1 ton per hectare, 1.5 ton per hectare, 2 tons per hectare, very low productivity. But even in areas that have actually quite substantial rainfall, 800 millimeters per year, 1,000 millimeters per year, 1,200 millimeters per year, sometimes even more. So we see low yields across the board in almost all Nile countries, irrespective of actually very good rainfall, of not so much very good, but a lot of rainfall in terms of volume. And I think this represents large untapped agricultural potential. And obviously, improving the yield in these underperforming farming systems is key to achieving food security. If we could, for instance, increase yields from 2 tons per hectare to 4 tons per hectare, or 1.5 tons per hectare to 4 tons per hectare, we effectively double the production of rain-fed farming, and that would solve many problems. Now, this is quite possible, but it is difficult. And what is important, and that brings me to my next slide, is that it actually doesn't require too much water. Sorry. Now, one of the main reasons why the yields in rain-fed farming is low is that we don't have secure water supply. When you look at the rain-fed areas in the Nile Basin, they actually receive quite substantial rainfall, as we just said, 1,000 millimeters, 1,200 millimeters, and so on. But they are also characterized by very high temporal variability, and which result in these occasional moisture deficits at critical points for plant growth. So there are periods of 2 weeks, 3 weeks in which there's no rainfall, and it leads to a very short drought, but a very short drought at a critical point, and that affects very much the growth of the plant and its yield. And because of these occasional, almost periodic moisture deficits that happen every other year or every third year, there is simply a very high risk of crop failure. And because of that, farmers are simply unwilling to invest in all these agricultural inputs, like improved seeds or fertilizer or other things that are required for this higher yields and for this agricultural modernization. Now, we looked into this and we found that these moisture deficits are actually quite small. In almost all cases where we looked at it, it was less than 100 millimeters per crop per season. And very often it was even smaller. It was 50 millimeters, 60 millimeters per crop per season. So if you would be able to supplement these relatively small volumes of water, and that would result in secure water supply during the entire growth of the plants, you can create this environment with secure water supply where farmers would be willing to invest in the ag inputs such as modern seeds and good seeds and fertilizer. So the volumes of water that are required to provide secure water supply in rain-fed farming in most of the rain-fed farming areas in the Nile Basin are relatively small. I think this is a very important insight. And that brings us to the potential of supplementary irrigation. And I think here we need to realize that in the rain-fed farming system, smallholders dominate in the Nile Basin. So our intervention should be not too complicated. It should be a little bit straightforward, and supplementary irrigation can be very practical. I think that the most appropriate is small-scale supplementary irrigation to prevent these relatively small moisture deficits. And because these volumes are relatively small, water can be supplied by either shallow groundwater or water harvested or even some small rivers. And then, of course, the best is to combine it with improved soil management so that you increase the moisture storage capacity of soil so that you can make better use of rainfall, which is quite substantial. You can also try to introduce microclimates to reduce evapotranspiration, or use cover crops also to reduce evapotranspiration and increase the soil so that you have higher moisture storage capacity to make better use of rainfall. And the supplementary irrigation in combination with these other measures to improve soil water management primarily function to extend the productivity of this quite substantial rainfall. So when you have, say, 1,000 millimeters of rainfall in a rain-fed area, and you can provide secure water supply with, say, 50 meters of supplementary irrigation, then you can see that it's actually the rainfall that is the primary source of water to the crops, and the supplementary irrigation mainly serves to provide this secure water supply. And I think for large parts of the Nile Basin, in particular in the equatorial zone, it may not really affect Nile flows because of the very low runoff coefficient in large parts of the Nile Basin. If we look, for instance, at the equatorial zone, we have a runoff coefficient of, say, 4%. So it means that out of all the rainfall, only 4% reaches the river system and 96% reaches or stays somewhere and can be used to increase or to provide this secure water supply and to increase this productivity of rain-fed farming. Now, this all sounds too good to be true, but we have real difficulties in getting this done. I think the methodologies involved are well known. The problem we have is well known. There are a set of proven solutions that have been used in many parts of the world, but somehow we don't get it done. And I think the reason for that is that for smallholder farmers, implementing these measures doesn't make sense from an economic perspective. And that is because of low farm gain prices and the high cost for agriculture inputs. So at the moment, we simply do not have the financial incentives for supplementary irrigation, for good land husbandry, for good land management, for investments in soil conservation, and for investments in increasing soil moisture storage. And I think this is important because we always talk about water resources, and we say that agriculture in the Nile Basin is very much affected by the water constraint, but maybe the solution is much more in the economic arena, and we have to come to the conclusion that agriculture transformation and modernization will not succeed without improving the economic viability for smallholders. And as I just said, this has nothing to do with water resources. Of course, the private sector is important in the agriculture sector. The private sector is the driver, and this is where many things happen. But I think we should not forget the critical role of government to get this done, because governments are really needed to provide the rural infrastructure, the rural electrification, to ensure the secure land tenure, to regulate markets, to make sure that there is a viable and fair farm gate prices that encourages farmers to implement these very practical and feasible measures that can lead to water security. And I think we have to note here that that none of the Nile countries, bar one, and I'm not going to mention who, prioritizes agriculture sector in terms of budget allocation, as has been agreed some years back to allocate 10% of government budget to the agricultural sector. And then one more thing to measure, and that is the very high food losses that we experience, that we see everywhere. And that's not only the Nile Basin, this is effectively everywhere. Food losses, we don't have real figures, so we only have estimates. And food losses are estimated at 50% or more. So from harvest, post-harvest, supply chain, processing, retail, household, 50% of food is lost. And in the Nile Basin, it's more lost in the post-harvest and in the processing and the transport. And in other countries in the world, it's often more lost in the households. But it's 50%, and 50% represents an enormous waste of scarce water. But also, it really reduces the profitability of agriculture. And we had just seen that, that we have to increase the economic viability of agriculture in order to encourage smallholders to invest in these measures to achieve water security. Just reducing food losses by 25% would make an immense impact on the food security and water balance in the Nile Basin. And best of all, it's a no-regret measure. Reduce food losses across the board, and countries can really work on this together if they wish, because it's non-political, it's non-confrontational, it's really a no-regret measure. My last slide, are we heading towards an inevitable crisis? And I think no. In the Nile Basin, there are still lots and lots of options to achieve food security. I think there really are many. However, there's no silver bullet. Interventions need to happen in all farming systems. And what is important is that they need to be properly timed and sequenced in the right way. Fortunately, many of these interventions can take place outside the water sector. For instance, increasing farm gate prices, reducing food losses, all these things can happen outside the water sector and do not put a claim on the scarce water resources in the Nile Basin. So lots is possible, really lots is possible. What is worrying is that there is actually little progress in realizing all these available options. And I think a little bit some more sense of urgency would be required and would be welcome. And this is where I would like to leave it. Thank you so much, everybody, and sorry for all the technical mishaps that happened earlier in my presentation.
Thanks, thanks, Bart. Thanks very much, really, for bearing with us despite the complexity of this technology. I appreciate really. I like the insight you gave us. It's quite interesting. The thing you brought up, like the overall situation in terms of food security across Nile Basin, the mixed picture. You told us overall also that the whole, the majority of population getting less than 3,000 kilocalorie per day adult equivalent. And more interestingly, the hope that you showed us on improving grain-fed yield, as the current gap is already very high. And I also captured, in order to exploit this huge yield gap, the need for really improve economic viability for smallholder farmers as a key strategy, given that they are risk averse generally. So thanks for that, and also the insight in terms of the food loss, 50% food loss, and which you usually count as a production when we try to estimate crop water productivity, but never used that, never went to the plate. I think that's a critical, important policy measures, and as the conclusion, what you told us, many of the intervention are outside water sector, which means if all work genuinely really toward this improving the water productivity, efficient use of water to meet the current food demand supply gap, even engagement, involvement, intervention in water sector, collaboration, coordination in outside water sector, including, probably the virtual water trade. I think that's very, very interesting insight. Maybe there will be more chance to discuss this during the panel discussion. Without taking much time, I would like to go to the next speaker, Dr. Iltigani Ilnoor Bashar. He is from Water Management and Irrigation Institute, University of Gazira, Sudan. Dr. Bashir has working experience more than 12 years in applied research related to several aspects of water resources. This includes a wide experience in integrated water resource management, water resource participatory water management, and agricultural water-related issues. Additionally, he has appreciated experience in proposal writing, project evaluation, and management. We've conducted many consultancies for many governmental and non-governmental organizations. He's highly qualified in formulating and conducting result-oriented research. He is going to give us highlight on options to enhance efficient agricultural water use in the Nile Basin to achieve food security. This is another interesting topic. Dr. Bashar, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sam, very much. Did you hear me?
Yes, very clear. Can you make it on slide view?
Slide view.
Yeah.
My slide. Huh?
Some people were complaining that we have to put it on
Slide view, yeah.
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah. Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Oops.
Thank you. I want to give you a presentation on options to enhance efficient agricultural water use in the Nile Basin to achieve food security. Because as the previous speaker told that water is the main constraint maybe to improve agriculture or to improve agricultural sector. And agriculture is a major water consumptive sector worldwide, and particularly in the Nile Basin. Therefore, we have to manage our water effectively by means of to give the exact water to the crop at the required time without more cost. This is what I mean by good management, and to avoid losses in water while we are irrigating our crops. Shift to more efficient water use tools, because now we are using traditional irrigation systems, and particularly the open surface irrigation. There is a lot of water losses, and we have to shift to more efficient water use tools, and we have to control our water effectively so as to reduce the losses of water and to increase the output from water use. We have to use technology in our irrigation systems, in our agricultural sector, because we are now practicing traditional agriculture, using traditional tools, using traditional irrigation systems, using traditional rain-fed systems. We have to modernize our agriculture as a whole. To modernize our agriculture, we mean we have to select which crop grow best and where. And we have to irrigate our fields in a smart way. And we have to use the right equipment in agriculture. And we have to evaluate the performance of the output of the product. Now we are just practicing agriculture, but we don't evaluate how much water we use in agriculture, how much we get as output from agriculture. And we have to control our all things in agriculture to use water in the right way. Because so far we use less, we produce less production with much water. Even if we look at this chart, if it is clear, we use much of water to produce one dish of food. In beef, in chicken, in cereal crops, in rice, in wheat, in all crops, we use a lot of water to produce less kilograms. And also this is typical in sorghum, in traditional red-fed farming system in Sudan, for example. And also this is kilogram per meter cube of water. It indicates that we use a lot of water to produce less food. So we have to change this. We have to use less water and produce much food. So the challenges, I think, is in mismanagement of water and traditional agricultural practices we use. These are the main challenges. And these are the main problems of low productivity and food insecurity in the region. So unless to improve our water use and to use technology in agriculture, I think we will work inefficient. But there is options to enhance efficient water use in agriculture I think one option is to shift to modern irrigation systems. We have to test, or we have to practice a modern irrigation system like drip irrigation, like other irrigation types more than surface. We have to practice good water harvesting practices to supplement irrigation, because as Dr. Paris says that we need to supplement irrigation to improve soil moisture. And we have to concentrate on valuable crops instead of these traditional crops, which uses much of water and produce less in terms of money. So we have to concentrate on valuable crops. These are options to improve our irrigation, because by research, these options found to be the best options to enhance efficient water use and increase productivity. For example, yield can increase significantly using water harvesting, and drip irrigation can increase agricultural productivity by 5-fold. So to improve or to enhance our water use, we have to do these practices. So I think the solution is to establish a regional center or regional program in the Nile Basin to enhance efficient water use and land also to achieve food security. I think this region or this center or this program is to be work in all Nile Basin countries for one objective is how to enhance our water use in agriculture to achieve food security. This is, I think, the all. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Bashir. This is another interesting insight. Can you unshare your PowerPoint slides?
Okay.
Yeah, your points really complement the previous speakers, particularly when you mention good water harvesting practice for supplementary irrigation. This is particularly in, exploiting rain-fed system yield gap, and crop selection is really something you brought in. I think always as a system agronomist, as my experience in Nile Basin, what I foresee is there are 3 critical input that we need to improve the water productivity. One is the crop selection, which you mentioned, depending on available water. The second one is, of course, an input. Input could be organic or inorganic fertilizer, depending on where and how much water you have, how accessible you are to market. And the third point is, well, of course, proper agronomic practices there. I think, and optimizing your water. Those 3 things are, you get directly from their own yield limiting nature, and also the interaction between the genetics and the water and the fertilizer. So thanks a lot. That's an interesting insight for this webinar. And without taking much time, I would like to call upon the next speaker, Dr. Emmanuel Ararsan, Associate Professor at University of Gondar, Ethiopia. He did his PhD very recently on area of blue water deficit irrigation, vertical water management in the Blue Nile Basin. We will have an interesting session here again. I would call upon Dr. Emmanuel. The floor is yours, please. Emmanuel, you are muted. Dr. Emmanuel. Dr. Emmanuel. So I can see him online. He's not replying. Maybe, well, connection problem could be an issue. Dr. Emmanuel. Then I prefer to move to the next speaker.
Hello.
Yeah, Emmanuel.
Yeah.
Please share your screen. It is your turn.
Okay, let me share it. Is this visible?
No, I can't see.
Okay.
Give it a couple of seconds, it will come up.
Okay, okay. It says failed.
Oh, can you reshare again?
Okay.
You made a lot of changes to the one you shared with me yesterday.
Okay. Not visible? Still.
Plan to share ያረከኝ ላይ ብዙ ለውጥ አድርገሃል?
No change at all.
Okay, withdraw አድርጌ አንተ ነው. Withdraw,
Okay.
I can share. And share yours.
Okay. Okay.
Can you see it?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, okay.
Okay, thank you for the inconvenience. Thank you, Dr. Amara, for introducing me. This is Dr. Amani from University of Gondar. Actually, this research work is part of a PhD thesis on sustainable use of irrigation water footprint and virtual water in advancing transboundary water policy in Nile Basin country. This particular research is focusing on blue water saving potential through deficit irrigation and organic mulching in Nile Basin countries. Actually, we have made some amendments after submission of this abstracts. This research work is supervised and mentored by Dr. Masud Margia from Alabama University, USA, and Dr. Yop and late Professor Ein Hoekstra from University of Twente, the Netherlands, and Dr. Worku Lagasa from Wallo University, and Azaga Gabriel Mariam from Addis Ababa University. So, can you go next slide? Next, yeah, the introduction. Yeah, as an introduction, the world is facing a huge challenge in balancing the demand and the supply for the growing population and development with the declining freshwater resources. The growing of this population and the global climate change as well as socio-economic development in the world are facing a fresh water scarcity. Unless this water management improves to balance the supply and the demand of this growing population, it could be very difficult to support an ever-increasing of this population. Actually, this freshwater scarcity requires sustainable equitable and efficient allocation of blue and this green water resources. As a problem statement, actually, water scarcity can be alleviated through a potential solution of deficit irrigation and water footprint reduction in agricultural production. Since water footprint concept is an emerging as useful policy tools, studies on efficient water use and water footprint will play a key role in sustainable water management in water scarce regions like Nile Basin. Hence, providing this policy relevant information by assessing this water footprint as well as from the reference and with different scenarios for crop production, and incorporating this into policy is crucial. Since an equal distribution in the climate as well as water resource need to innovative solution. As a research question, what will be the overall water saving with water footprint reduction by implementing deficit irrigation and organic mulching related to the reference case is a research question. In order to achieve this research question, the objective of this study is to evaluate the blue water saving potential through deficit irrigation and organic mulching in irrigated agriculture of Nile Basin countries. The study is actually conducted in the whole Nile Basin country, which is covered by 11 Nile Basin country, which is about 10% of African African country. The climate is actually stretched with different agroclimates. So regarding the methods, 5 different crops were selected based on FAO data sets, based on the production in the area harvested. Aquacrop plugin was used in order to simulate the data, and the methods and the framework was actually based on the assessment manual for water footprint assessment, as well as the framework which is developed by Hobom et al. 2019. The key findings of the research is actually the average water footprint for blue water footprint of crops in meter cube per country and per crop. In the reference case, we have done in 2 different scenarios. First, we simulate the data at the reference case, and then with different water saving practices. So this chart shows that the water footprint of crops per country and per crops. So the blue water footprint of selected these 5 different crops among these 5 different crops were largest in Sudan, in Egypt, and Tanzania. Among the 5 different crops, sorghum production accounts for the largest share, which is followed by maize and rice. Can you go to next? Regarding the effects of deficit irrigation and organic mulching in reducing the water footprint per ton of the crops, this figure shows that among the 5 different crops, the maize production, the blue water footprint of maize production in the whole Nile Basin country under the reference case and water saving scenario, that is under deficit irrigation and organic mulching. As we can see from the map, the difference between the light and the dark blue bar shows that the effects of best management practices with the reference case with different time period. So Egypt and as we can see from the maps, Egypt and Sudan produces large amount of crops were actually in this area, the crop water requirement and evapotranspiration is very high, which implies that large water footprint, and we can we can save a large amount of water by implementing this water saving scenario in this region. The difference across this country is actually depend on the difference in crops and agroclimates. Yeah, regarding the blue water saving potential, this table shows that the blue water saving of crop in millimeter cube per year for an average year of 2011 to 2050. Among the crops for millets and groundnuts, large production is observed in Sudan and small in Burundi. The blue water footprint of reduction for rice and maize are large in Egypt and small in Uganda and Burundi, respectively. For sorghum, large in Sudan, while small in Congo. Yeah, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, regarding the spatial analysis, the same spatial allocation of the 5 crops were done. This map actually shows that the spatial allocation of maize production, the water footprint of this maize production under different different periods, that is in 1986 and 2050. As you can see from the map, the lower Nile basin countries have largest total water footprint compared to the upper Nile basin country for all the crops. Actually, this is for the maize production, but the largest water footprint is actually for the whole crops. This is actually due to the lack of rainfall and high aridity in that region. If large harvested area, the large water footprint is observed in upper Nile basin countries. Can you go to next? As a conclusion, regional water saving and water scarcity alleviation in water scarce region like Nile can realize by reducing water footprint of crops. Under current conditions, the largest crop water footprint were found in Egypt, Sudan, South Sudan, and Tanzania. Downstream countries like Egypt and Sudan have higher water footprint for crop production as compared to the upstream countries like Ethiopia. Sudan and Egypt produces large amount of crops with large water footprint actually in this region where crop water requirement is very high and more ET due to aridity. As a recommendation, this study provides the following startup suggestions for water policy implication on shared water. The first one is a joint strategic plan, which this implies this work provide an empirical data of long-term changes on the water footprint of crops which is produced in the region, and linking state potential resources with water efficiency, which indicates that water can save by using water saving technology like mulching and deficit irrigation. Smart transboundary water policy should be enhanced, and this implies that policy should include the water footprint of crops that can improve by considering a comparative advantage. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Emmanuel. This is another interesting insight from assessing the whole Nile Basin water footprint for selected crops and giving us the spatial distribution and as well as temporal distribution, and also checking on what different scenarios improvement can give us. And finally, for some policy insights, how we can collaborate and how we can move forward to, to close the currently existing water demand supply gaps. Thanks a lot. I think without taking much time, I'd like to call the next speaker, Dr. Khalid. Dr. Khalid is working in Water Studies Center, King Faisal University, Saudi Arabia, Hydraulics Research Center in Sudan. So both in Saudi Arabia and in Sudan. His background, PhD in remote sensing and GIS from Dresden University of Technology, Germany, MSc in agricultural engineering from University of Khartoum, Sudan. He will give us highlight on estimation of water consumption for wheat using remote sensing and Sebal model under modern irrigation system in Sudan. Dr. Khalid, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Amari. Actually, I'm out of office, therefore I would present from my mobile phone. And thank you that Nicholas now is taking care for the PowerPoint. So I will present under the title, Estimation of Water Consumption and Productivity for Wheat using Remote Sensing and Sebal model under modern irrigation system in Sudan. And it is a part of a project that have been implemented in Sudan, Ethiopia, and Egypt in water account. So next, please. Water use, biomass production, water productivity are essential information to assess water and land productivity. And this information are absolutely necessary to guide the daily operation of agricultural water management. Also, water productivity can be defined in different terms according to the target. But in agricultural production, it is the ratio of mass of product to the amount of water consumed, or the value of divert per unit of water used. Accordingly, the improve of water productivity aiming to producing more food, income, better livelihood, and ecosystem services with less water. Next slide, please. The main question of this study was how remote sensing can efficiently support the quantification of crop water requirements and water productivity for evaluating the performance of agricultural production systems. And this can improve the ability of decision makers, investors, and communities to make more informed decision about their agricultural benefits. Therefore, the objective of the study was to estimate wheat water consumption and water productivity in the central clay plain of Sudan through integrating remotely sensed image, climate data, and biophysical modeling. The case study is Al-Waha Farm, is located in the east bank of the Blue Nile. It is operated and invested by private sector. It is by a big company in Sudan. The crop area covered more than 100 pivots. However, the orange pivots are only for the wheat. It is a winter wheat from the cropping season of the year 2014-2015. The total cultivated area during that season was almost more than 1,000 hectares. The crop calendar showed that the land preparation and planting were started during November, while December and January and February was mainly for crop establishment and growing. The harvest take place up to the mid of March. Next. In order to quantify the water use, the biomass, and water productivity, we apply the surface energy balance algorithm for land, which is developed by Wim Bastiansin in 1998. The main inputs of the model are the satellite data from which we get the spectral parameters like the normalized different vegetation index, the surface albedo, the surface temperature, surface emissivity, and so on. Also, the climate data, there was a weather station which was located on the farm. We get some weather data like the air temperature, relative humidity, wind speed, solar radiation, and so on. Also, there is another two inputs, the digital elevation model, which was used mainly for correction of the topographic, and the land use map. Land use map is not part of the calculation of the water use parameters. However, it was used to differentiate between the vegetation cover and non-vegetation cover. The evapotranspiration was calculated using the CBAL model as a residual of the energy balance, and in subsequence, the biomass production and the water productivity were estimated. Next. Yeah. The model was validated using the FAO-Bellman method and also the direct measurement of the applied water in the field. Next, please. The results, the spatial distribution of the actual transpiration results show that the monthly consumption of the water was the highest was during January at the peak of the crop establishment and the growing. This value was reduced when the crop starts to become dry, when it is going toward the harvesting stage, and the maximum value was 20 millimeters per month, while the seasonal actual evapotranspiration was ranging between 500 to 800 millimeters per season. The season was only about 4 months, and this one was consistent with the FAO reference, which was 600 to 800 millimeters for wheat. Next, please. The biomass, the spatial distribution of the biomass. Here we have two maps, the daily maps of the actual of the biomass production and the monthly. And we can see in the both maps, they are consistent because during the crop, during November, during preparation and planting, almost the value is around 0. However, with the crop establishment in December and January, these values are increased. So the maximum value was around 100 kilogram per hectare. And this value also were started to decrease when we are going toward the harvesting time. The grain yield out of the 20 pivots almost range between 3 to 4 tons per hectare. Next, please. Next slide. Okay. The water productivity show that the daily value of the water productivity from the spatial distribution maps, we can see that the peak value also were during the peak time of the crop establishment, which was in December and January, and this value range from 1.5 to 2.5 kilogram per cubic meter, while the seasonal value was ranging between 1 to 2 kilogram per cubic meters. This value also was in the range with the reference value from the FAO, which were 1.2 to 2.2 kilogram per cubic meter, while at global scale for wheat, it was a little bit high, which was 2.4 kilogram per cubic meters. And we can see that also the water productivity trends show the same trends of the biomass production. Next, please. Next slide. Yeah, the validation of the CBAL model were made from selecting of 3 pivots from the front, the middle, and the tail of the field. And we can see that from the above chart, there is a good agreement between the applied irrigation by the pivot and the CBAL. And we can see also the root mean square error was ranging almost between 0.6 to 0.8 millimeter per day, while when we compare the 3 methods together, the CBAL model and the applied irrigation in the field and the FAO-Benman-Montes method, we can see that the patterns during the winter season is almost the same, although the values of the FAO-Benman methods are a little bit higher compared to the CBAL and the actual applied water in the field. Next, please. Yeah. I will conclude with some remarks. In order to raise water productivity at field levels, we need to introduce appropriate cultivars, planting methods, minimum tillage, timely irrigation to synchronize water application with the most sensitive methods, also nutrient management, and improved of drainage in order to control the water table. Also, introducing water-saving irrigation techniques such as the precision technology, like low-energy precision applications that can be combined with the sprinkler irrigation in the center pivot. Delivery techniques, which is more precise, can be applied. Also, introduction of on-demand delivery of irrigation supplies. Changing the focus from the field level to system and river basin levels change the relative importance of the various water management processes, and this is what we call accounting for water productivity at system and basin levels rather than the only farm levels. Also, as this case study was implemented, or this investment was conducted by private sectors, that means the private sectors who are invested in agriculture should help in sustaining production, food security, and community development in the Nile Basin. Thank you so much.
Thanks, thanks a lot, Dr. Khalid. This is another interesting insights. Probably covers really what we put as the title of this webinar on technology option. The procedures, the technology used is, one of the tools that as Nile Basin, there are some more actually that as a Nile Basin we have to look at it. And probably more interesting discussion will appear during the panel discussion. Thanks a lot. With this, probably I will take you to our last presentation from Mr. Laban. From Makerere University, a research officer in Kampala, Uganda. He's a researcher in freshwater fisheries. He is going to present on the extent of cage aquaculture, adherence to best practices, and the reflection for sustainable aquaculture in Nile Basin water bodies. He will try to link fisheries to productive use of water, nutritional security, food security issues. Dr. Laban, the floor is yours. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. You are hearing me?
Yeah, very
okay, thanks. Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. I start with a correction. I'm not from Makerere University. I'm from the National Fisheries Resources Research Institute in Jinja. We do research on all aspects of fisheries and aquaculture in Uganda. So my presentation is on the extent of cage aquaculture, adherence to best practices and reflections for sustainable aquaculture on the Nile Basin water bodies. And my presentation is going to be about the concerns that we have on cage aquaculture on our water bodies. I'll show the extent and magnitude of the industry and then show that farmers are not 100% following the best practices for making the industry sustainable. Yeah, the African continent and the Nile Basin in particular are fish deficient. Here we are looking at an example from Uganda. When we compare the annual fish production of the country to the amount of fish required, for instance, for export and feeding the national population at the average global annual per capita level, we look at the fish that is required to feed livestock, we remain with a deficit of more than 500 and for a deficit of more than 600,000 tons. Now that deficit throughout the region has challenges, and what we see is low per capita fish consumption and malnutrition of millions. Now here we see annual per capita consumption of fish for the world, and when you look at the region, the Nile Basin countries, you see that most of the countries, apart from Egypt and Uganda, everyone is eating less than 10 kilograms in a year. And that is worse for countries like Ethiopia, countries like Kenya, South Sudan and Sudan, where the consumption is less than 5 kilograms every year for each person. And the implication is that we have millions who are malnourished. Here we are looking at the statistics of people in millions that are malnourished in each region of the world. Here in red, in the red box, you see that the East African region, where most of the Nile Basin countries are found, has the highest population, 113 millions who are malnourished, and that is the highest for the African continent itself. We're seeing that the most malnourished people in Africa are in the Nile Basin countries. So then, how do we increase fish production, which is vital for fighting malnutrition? This can be possible through integrating fish farming into existing farming systems and cage aquaculture. Apparently, this aspect of managing water for fish has immense fish production potential, according to a study that was done in 2006 from the World Fish Center. Now, the subject of today's presentation is cage aquaculture. Cage aquaculture has immense fish production potential and has been expanding on our water bodies. Its high potential emanates from the fact that you can do fish farming without land. It has a high production per unit area compared to pond aquaculture, which we are used to. But however, if not sustainably done, it can cause conflicts among users, cause destruction of the environment, and can, in the process, be counter-effective in the interventions to increase fish supply. Here we see challenges which have been faced elsewhere, like in the Philippines and in Indonesia, when cage aquaculture goes on with no sustainability in practice. At the end, the installations, the farms are destroyed themselves. So what our work looked at was examining the extent and magnitude of development of cage aquaculture and whether the best practices are being followed. Our approach was that we looked for locations of cage fish farms in satellite images mainly, and then picked key attributes of those farms, such as the number of cages, locations, and area covered. Looking for them in satellite images available through Google Earth. And then we also looked at how they are avoiding areas that are polluted, for example, and the protected areas which are the best practices. And what we saw is that cage aquaculture is found is widespread. We observed about 263 installations with more than 20,000 cages on water bodies across the African continent. But the Lake Victoria and so to say the Nile Basin is a hotspot. Lake Victoria was found with about 105 installations, which is 39% of all the installations that we saw on water bodies in Africa. And it had 12,086 cages. The other water bodies that had cages in the Nile Basin include the River Nile and Lake Albert. So these numbers are big, given that just in 2006, the industry was just at pilot stage. It was only commercial on Lake Kariba in Zimbabwe. But right now it is spread to many countries, especially in the Nile Basin region. What is another thing that we saw, especially in line with sustainability, is that although it is on these water bodies, the area occupied is still low. For instance, on Lake Victoria, we saw that the surface area under cages is just 0.0026%, which is still very low. But regarding sustainability, we see that farmers are disregarding the best practices. For instance, here we see that in most cases, cages are near the shoreline, which is not the best practice if we want to sustain. And then another thing we saw is that 82% of the installations were within waters that are less than 5 meters deep. And on Lake Victoria, 73% of the installations, that is 73% of 105 installations on the lake, were in eutrophic and hypertrophic waters. So those are waters that are already polluted. The only interventions that would be there would be interventions to reduce the level of pollution. But here we are putting in cages that increase the pollution. So that is contrary to best practices. And then we also observed the installations that are in close proximity to protected areas. We are not observing the fact that for sustainability they have to be about 1 kilometer away. But that one was only in Uganda and and Zimbabwe for the interest of the whole African continent. Now, the fact is that cage aquaculture has potential. As I conclude, the sector has potential to close the fish supply deficit in the region and provide other social benefits like employment and income. However, if it is not appropriately guided, it would become unsustainable, causing conflict with other water uses, environmental degradation, and economic losses to the enterprises themselves. So looking ahead, we recommend that there should be zoning in the water bodies in the region so that we prohibit nearshore areas. We exclude cage aquaculture from rivers, small lakes, and reservoirs, shallow lakes, so that these are excluded at least from intensive cage aquaculture. And also in operation of the farms, there should be respect to best practices like farming native fish species, making sure that the stocking rates are appropriate, making sure that feeding efficiency is also appropriate, not to worsen the issues of eutrophication, do fish diseases surveillance, and also do environmental monitoring. And then there should be development of regulatory frameworks where they're not available to make sure that the industry is regulated. As I finish, the need for more nutritious food in the region and the continent in particular makes it difficult to reject cage aquaculture development on our water bodies. However, proponents of the sector should make sure that there is full adherence to best practices to sustain other water uses, particularly wild capture fisheries. Thank you. This paper is published in the Journal of Regulatory Research, and you can find it for more details. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mr. Leban. That's really an interesting insight. Also, contribute a lot to the theme of this webinar. Particularly if we want me to pick the nutritional level across African countries, the Nile countries particularly. And I think one key point which I picked from your presentation is also the integration of fish into agriculture, particularly in irrigation production. Implicitly, there are two things I would take from this. One is to improve the productivity of irrigation by using the same water for fish production. The second is to double even the nutritional productivity of the water. We estimate water efficiency not only in terms of biomass or grain yield, but also one can go down into the nutritional quality that you produce per unit of water input. So this will enhance really that component. And I thank you very much. I think we had covered all the presentation, and in my mind addressed all what we put under the webinar's lead question and the webinar's title, objectives. The next session where we are going to really enrich this whole presentation would be through panel discussion, which my colleague Dr. Johannes is going to take over and lead us through the whole process. Dr. Johannes, are you ready?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Amara. I think those were very excellent presentations from the previous speakers. I wish we had a little bit more time to hear a little more detail about the topics, but I think given the time that we have to constrain the topics, and now it's time for the discussion. And I'm pleased to invite back the panelists Dr. David, Dr. Bart, and Dr. Tlaun for this panel discussion. So before I start, let me say a little bit about the format we'll be following in this panel discussion. We have allotted a total of 15 minutes. We have some questions compiled, questions forwarded by the attendees, as well as questions we formulated that we thought would add value to the discussion. So given the constraint in time, we shall have 2 rounds of questions, and it will be one question for each one of the panelists. But I think if we have more time, we'll see if we can try and accommodate more questions to enrich the discussion. So without further ado, I will invite Dr. David McConnell. That the presentation you gave was really interesting, and how and to what extent irrigation influenced dietary diversity and food security in the Nile Basin. I also quite like those 5 pathways or dimensions in which you indicated the linkage between irrigation and nutrition. Dietary diversity is very essential to overall well-being of the society, and it have a trickling effect on the economy as well. So these things are highly interlinked. Now the question is, as the Nile Basin is water stressed, part of the options that the countries are looking into is trying and intensify rain-fed agriculture or rain-fed / supplementary irrigation, as pointed out by Bart. So the question is, what should the Nile Basin countries give priority to incorporate in their plans or take policy measures in order to address this gap in dietary diversity, while thinking of this intensification in the rain-fed agriculture, as we have seen in your presentation, at least for Ethiopia, and there was a significant gap. So I think you have mentioned that a bit in your presentation during last slides, but we would like to hear more about that, what can be done in order to bridge this gap, particularly from dietary diversity perspective. Thank you. Back to you, Dr. McConnell. Dr. David.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johannes. I really appreciate the question. I think there are a number of things that should be done, some of which are not necessarily in the agricultural sector. Dietary diversity, either farmers can produce more food and more diversified foods. There are a couple of things I think I just want to highlight, even though there could be a number of intervention area. One is access to markets. So the production pathway versus the income pathway inherently is going to be associated with access to roads and access to markets. In places where, whether it is rain-fed agriculture or irrigated agriculture, when areas are closer to market, connected both in its infrastructural sense as well as in its digital sense, in the form of price information and so on, then farmers can even afford to focus on specific high-value crops. They can sell those crops and purchase more diversified foods. In the absence of markets, or when the households are far from markets, then the production pathway is going to be more pertinent. So we need to improve. The bigger picture is we need to improve infrastructure, market infrastructure, so that farmers can exchange diversified foods, can sell their markets, earn more money from their produce, irrigated or otherwise, and be able to afford more diversified food. Another thing I think I want to emphasize is we need to more agricultural production, whether through intensified rain-fed or irrigated system, needs to be coupled with nutrition and behavioral change communication trainings to households. You might be surprised in areas where there could be fruit produced only for the market, the society that may not know that specific crop, food production. I mean, there has to be that type of nutrition messaging, even preparation of foods. So it has to be holistic in the sense that we can't just do it by specific expertise, but we need to involve nutritionists, social scientists, engineers, and so on. And it has to be hands on deck in terms of having everyone involved. I hope that answers part of the question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Diet. I have a follow-up question, but I'll get back to you on the second round if we have sufficient time. Now on to Dr. Bart. Picking up from your last slide, the last statement, I think you've pointed out something along the lines of the lack of progress in realizing the available option as one of the challenges. But I guess my question is, what more can the Nile Basin Initiative do in that regard in order to support the countries have better understanding, or in other words, what area should be given more emphasis to address that?
Thank you so much, Johannes. I think this is a very interesting question. It's in a way the $1 million question. I think one of the big problems is that the problems are across sectors. So we have to improve water, we have to improve rural infrastructure, we have to improve rural electrification. There's many things that we have to improve. Land tenure, we have to improve market systems. There's many different aspects in this very complex problem. And water people talk with the water people, and agriculture people talk with the agriculture people, and land tenure people talk with the land people. I think what the Nile Basin can do is to create this dialogue with everybody. I think when you look at the Nile issues, we are very much focused on water. We know a lot about water, but we still have to involve the proper decision makers in the agriculture sector, in the planning sector, in the economic development sector. And I don't see that happen. And I think that is the reason why the progress is effectively low, because everybody has to be on board in this. You have to create a common understanding among people from very different backgrounds to get this policy, to get these policy interventions going. And I think the Nile Basin Initiative would be so well positioned to initiate this cross-sectoral thinking, and to bring these people together and create this common understanding of this problem that can lead to policy action. So my hope is, I think actually when I look at the Nile Basin, I think you may be the best possible institution to initiate this. Maybe you are the only one to be able to initiate this and to create this common understanding among sectors that lead to some policy action and some sense of urgency.
Thank you very much, Bart. That was really a very good response. Dr. Tlahun, my question for you is, I think the capacity for livestock sector to contribute to food security has been highlighted both in your presentation as well as the other speakers. I would like to get your thoughts or perspective regarding the potential area of intervention, potential investment option or policy action in the livestock sector specifically to capitalize on its contribution towards this efficient agricultural water use and the Nile Basin to achieve food security.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Johannes. You know, in our setting in Africa, the livestock center is intertwined with a bigger farming system. So we run hugely, you know, a crop livestock system. So it's very difficult to separate livestock from other systems. But what's really, you know, striking is our region is highly stricken by poverty. We in Agra are talking about feeding the people. And this region is probably one of the poorest. But also this is a region where you expect much worse extreme events, including climate change. So the water which is flowing now may not even flow. And our response capacity to this type of adverse environment is very limited, including our communities and our governments. So it's like, you know, what is then the incentive for us in the region to make our resources better utilized? We talk about, you know, rivers like the Nile. You know, it starts somewhere, it ends somewhere, and there's a lot happening in between. So how do we make sure that, you know, people at different levels in this whole basin are intervening to make sure that water is saved, water is better stored, better utilized, and commodities, livestock, like livestock and crop, are better managed. So, you know, I just wanted to talk about the incentives. If you start from the source countries, you know, what is the incentive for a farmer in Rwanda or in the Ethiopian mountains to protect the environment, the landscape that is generating the water, if he or she is not getting anything out of it? If the water flows through, you know, why should he put it, you know, in a green environment, increase the water yield, you know, all that protection management doesn't exist for now. So that is becoming even worse when you are not allowed to do anything in your own locality. The second challenge we face is, you know, we talk about water productivity, but we are also talking about export crops. You know, in downstream countries, you get, you know, very water demanding crops like vegetables, for example, or, you know, sugar cane. These are, you know, commodities which are very important for the countries in terms of export, getting earnings, but are extremely extractive in terms of water. So what alternative commodities do we have to replace some of these water demanding enterprise and commodities at a scale? And the third thing is, you know, okay, if you do that, you know, how do we move, particularly when it comes to small scale farming? I think the issue of market opportunities, market infrastructures that Dr. David, but also value addition to some of those products so that you get the same benefit with less water investment is going to be very critical. So all this, I think, for the livestock and crop system is, you know, the implication is that, for one, you know, we need to have to enhance incentives across all, you know, the different spots, be it in downstream and upstream. For downstream farmers, you know, they need the water, but what is the incentive for them, or the disincentive for them to economize it, you know? So what are the type of policies required to convince farmers that, you know, they can do less, they can do more with less water, and upstream farmers to conserve more water so that, you know, more water is flowing downstream. But also, you know, this type of basic level investments, you cannot do that by your own, not a single community, not a single country. So I think Dr. Hillard has mentioned that So how do we move from competition or competitive use to cooperation and collective action across these different, user groups, commodities, and landscapes? I think all that is contributing to livestock water productivity, crop water productivity, and system water productivity. So in the nutshell, what I would like to say is that, it needs integration, it needs cooperation, it needs incentives, but it needs also enforcement mechanisms at different levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tlahun. I think we pretty much exhausted, close to exhausting our allotted time. Perhaps I have I'll give a couple of minutes to ask one more round of questions. And panelists, I ask the panelists to be really very brief. Dr. David, given your research background and research interest in economics, food and water, could you briefly tell us about what are some of the tools, approaches, and technologies that are out there that would help us understand this convoluted interlinkage of economy, nutrition, and water? Thank you.
Okay. It's a very interesting question. I don't know if I have a very good answer for it though, but I think one thing I would like to understand is when we, at least from the water perspective, we tend to focus more on technologies and less on behaviors. So the technologies, most of them are already there, and you know more about the technologies than I do in the water area. But I think one thing that is missing that we should focus going forward is when you talk about irrigation adoption, when you talk about water use, efficient technologies and so on, at the end of the day, there is a human being who is going to decide whether or not to adopt it, whether or not to use that technology. So we have to experiment and understand, particularly from the view of farmers, and that behavioral aspect of it is missing, I think, and we need to focus more on that part. That's what I can say now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. David. Perhaps one more question to Dr. Bart along the lines of tools approach and the technologies, but specifically to the point that you raised in your presentation. You pointed out that need for moisture monitoring. I actually quite enjoyed your example that sometimes the small deficit can cause the crop to die. But what are some of the ways we can implement these tools or these moisture monitoring technologies? If you could tell us about that briefly, Dr. Bart. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Hannes. Actually, the answer may surprise you, but in my experience, when I discuss this with people, they always, the best answer I get is always to go back to the traditional farming system that existed 50 years ago, even 100 years ago. So people had figured it out. People had figured it out. If you go, for instance, to Buganda, in Uganda, you see a lot of agroforestry. There's always cover crops. People create these microclimates. They make sure that evaporation is not too much from the soil. So the Nile Basin, we know it's very diverse. Many different landscapes, many different climates. I think that I would go back and study very carefully the farming system that existed 50 years ago, 100 years ago, before the introduction of modern agriculture. And I think that can give you many cues on how to do this. What we know that doesn't work for the smallholders is this broad-scale agriculture where with lots of evaporation, where you till the soil, where you destroy the soil. So we know what doesn't work. If you want to know what works, traditional farming systems are your how do you call it? It's almost an introduction into what needs to be done, and then we can combine that with more modern technology.
Thank you very much, Bart. I think we have now come to the end of our panel discussion session. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the panelists and their input to this discussion. I now hand it back to Dr. Amara in order to continue the session. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Daud. Thanks everyone really for taking time. I'm addressing some of the questions raised by the moderator. In so doing, you feel there's so much gap that we couldn't cover by the different presentations. Thanks a lot. After saying this, I think I don't have to take you back to the content of the presentation. Rather, really, I will try to summarize key points that we captured as a policy implication for the Nile Basin countries. Generally, for me, the first point is about the food security, the nutritional security issues, really where irrigation already showed a promising way to fill this gap. In a way, if it is, for example, managed with water integrated with fish, for example, you can double this, both the productivity, the water productivity, as well as the nutritional productivity and the food productivity in the region. That's number one. Number two is, I think what Bart mentioned, and also Tlaun mentioned several times, is understanding the system. The tradition is just focusing on water. There are, other system elements that drives the system water use, water depletion, including people's behavior, the policy dimensions. I think that understanding help us really where better we can invest our water instead of, and there the issue of the whole water footprint can come in. I think that's an important message that we can take home. And the third point is, again, I will refer to Bart point, economic viability for smallholder farmers is really a key issue. They are, risk averse generally, as you know, and investment generally in terms of input or selected variety, mechanization, all those things needs a kind of a backstopping and incentive for them. So I think as a basin community, it's important to look at how smallholder farmers' economic viability can be ensured. And also, the point of improving water productivity and reducing competition for water to meet food and nutrition security could be outside water, including the virtual water trade, enabling elements, including other technologies that enhances a productive use of water, transfer of the virtual water trading, whatever related to that. I think that's another point I will take. In summary, incentives, collective action, and the enforcement mechanisms. This is critical in many cases. I think with that general view and probably key points, I would like to close this webinar. But before that, would like to really thank everybody who really committed your time to participate here to us, and probably take the key message somehow, preach wherever there are options and opportunities. Thanks to all participants. Thanks to the keynote speakers. Really, I appreciate that. You all have your own agenda every day, so taking time, organizing your slides, thinking about Nile Basin by itself, just sharing your insights is an excellent contribution to your community, your Nile Basin community, and thanks for that. And of course, the translator and the IT team, and of course, always the donors. Thanks a lot. And with this, I close this meeting and wish you a wonderful afternoon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.